Is there really a wrong way to start a cake business? It turns out, yes, there is. But passionate bakers either realized them too late or simply didn't know. If you've ever spent 8 hours on a cake and made barely anything from it, or had someone ghost you after placing an order, or felt like giving up because maybe I'm just not cut out for this video is for you. I'm Maria Haversham, and back when I was undercharging for my cakes in my cramped little kitchen, I made every single mistake I'm about to share with you. The worst part, I thought I was doing everything right. Here's what nobody tells you about starting a cake business. Most talented bakers fail not because they can't bake, but because they're focusing on the wrong things. And today I'm going to walk you through the 4 biggest mistakes that keep amazing bakers stuck in the friends and family cycle, working for pennies while everyone else seems to be thriving. So, if you're ready to stop spinning your whisk and start building a real cake business, let's cut into the cake and dive in. Okay, let's start with the number 1 mistake. And honestly, this one hits close to home because I lived it for way too long. You start baking for people you know because it feels safe, right? Your sister needs a birthday cake, your coworker wants something for their baby shower, your kid's teacher mentions they love your cupcakes at the school bake sale. And in the beginning, this feels amazing. You're getting orders, amazing. People are paying you. You think, this is it. I'm a real cake business now. But I know all too well that if you want something that lasts, you should get out of your comfort zone. For 2 whole years, I was the go-to person for every birthday party in my kids' friend circle. Every single one. I had a steady stream of orders, I was busy every weekend, and from the outside, it looked like I had a thriving cake business. But behind the scenes, I was actually charging $30 for a 2-tier custom cake that took me 6 hours to make. 6 hours. That's $5 an hour before I pay for the ingredients. Oh, but it gets worse. Because these were friends and family, I felt like this weird pressure to give them a deal. Like, how can I charge my neighbor a full price when she's been so nice to me? How could I ask my sister to pay what a real baker would charge? So I would say things like, oh, don't worry about it, just cover the ingredients, or it's no big deal, I love doing this anyway. Sound familiar? Here's the thing about the friends and family trap. It's not really about the money at first. It's about fear. Fear of putting yourself out there to strangers, fear of rejection, fear of someone saying, who do you think you are charging these prices? With friends and family, you already have that relationship built in. They're not going to judge you too harshly if the cake isn't perfect. They're going to be grateful and sweet and tell you how amazing you are. It's like having training wheels on your bike. It feels safe, but you're never really learning to ride. But in reality, this is a recipe for staying stuck forever. First, your pricing gets completely warped. When you start undercharging people you know, that becomes your baseline. You start thinking, well, if I charge my sister $30, how could I possibly charge a stranger $150? You've trained your brain to think that your work isn't worth much. Second, you never learn to sell to strangers. Selling to your neighbor who already loves you is completely different from convincing someone who found you online that you're worth hiring. Those are 2 completely different skill sets, and you're only practicing one of them. Third, and this is the big one, you develop what I call imposter voice syndrome. You start thinking, I'm not a real baker, I just help out friends. You see yourself as the hobby person who does favors, not as a professional who deserves professional prices. I remember this one moment that really drove it home for me. I was at a school pickup and another mom mentioned that she was looking for somebody to make a graduation cake for her daughter. Without thinking, I said, oh, I know someone who does cakes professionally. Let me give you her number. Then I realized I was talking about myself, but I didn't say myself as the professional cake person. Even though I was making cakes every weekend, even though I had repeat customers, even though people were constantly complimenting me on my work, in my head, I was still just a hobby baker who helped friends out. That's when I realized that the friends and family trap isn't about who you're selling to. It's about how you see yourself. As long as you see yourself as the person who helps out with cakes, you'll never price like a professional or market like a professional. Here's what I wish someone had told me back then. Your friends and family should be your biggest cheerleaders, not your primary customer base. They should be the ones referring strangers to you, not the ones you're relying on for income. Because here's the real crumb of it. Strangers actually make better customers than friends and family. I know that sounds backwards, but hear me out. Strangers don't feel awkward about paying you what you're worth. They don't expect to friend discount. They don't feel entitled to free changes or rush orders. They're coming to you specifically because they need what you offer and they're prepared to pay for it. When my neighbor orders a cake, there's all this emotional baggage, right? She's thinking about our relationship. I'm thinking about our relationship, and suddenly the business transaction gets all messy. But when a stranger finds me online and books a consultation, they're not thinking about anything except getting a beautiful cake for their celebration. They're in business mode, which means I can be in business mode too. The mindset shift that changed everything for me was this. I stopped thinking of myself as Maria, who happens to make cakes, and I started thinking of myself as Maria, the professional cake artist. That meant charging professional prices. That meant having professional policies. That meant treating every order like a real business transaction, even if it was for my best friend. Actually, especially if it was for my best friend, because your friends want to see you succeed. They want you to charge what you're worth. They want to support your real business, not enable your hobby pricing. I'll never forget the first time I quoted a stranger $400 for a wedding cake. My hands were literally shaking when I sent that email. But you know what happened? She said yes immediately. No negotiating, no asking for a discount, just perfect. When can we schedule the tasting? That's when I realized I've been living in this tiny little bubble where $400 seemed like an impossible amount to ask for a cake. But out in the real world, people expect to pay real prices for professional work. So, how do you break free from the friends and family trap? First, you have to make a decision. You have to decide whether you want a hobby that pays for ingredients or a business that pays your bills. If you want a business, you need to start acting like a business owner. That means professional pricing across the board, yes, even for your sister. That means having real policies about deposits and timelines. That means putting yourself out there to attract strangers. And here's the beautiful thing that happens when you make that shift. Your friends and family start seeing you differently too. Instead of thinking of you as the person who makes cheap cakes, they start thinking of you as the professional cake artist they know personally. Suddenly, they're bragging about you to their coworkers. My friend Maria is this amazing cake artist. You should totally hire her for your event. But here's where it gets interesting, and this leads us right into mistake number 2. Even after you decide to start charging professional prices and start reaching out to strangers, there's this voice in your head that says, but first I need to get better. First I need to perfect my techniques. First, I need to make sure my cakes are absolutely flawless before I can charge real money. And that, my friend, is the perfection trap. And it's probably costing you more money than you realize. So, mistake number 2 is what I call the perfection trap. This is when you start thinking, okay, I'm ready to charge more, but first I need to master fondant work. And then I need to learn about sugar flowers. Oh, and I should probably take that class on advanced piping. Then I'll be good enough to charge premium prices. Sounds familiar? I spent an entire summer, I'm talking 3 months, watching YouTube tutorials every night, practicing royal icing until 2 a.m., trying to get my roses to look exactly like the ones I saw on Instagram. I bought new tips, new molds, new everything. And you know what happened during those 3 months? My income went down because I was so focused on perfecting techniques that I wasn't taking orders. I was in this weird limbo where I thought I wasn't good enough yet, but I was actually turning down paying customers. But here's the thing that'll make your timer go off. I was completely missing what people actually pay for when they hire a cake artist. How did I learn about this? There was this one time when my manager at my corporate job asked me to make a cake for this huge company event. I was terrified because this wasn't friends and family anymore. This was going to be in front of like 100 people, including the CEO. I spent 3 sleepless nights working on this cake. I redid the flowers twice because they weren't perfect. I leveled those layers so many times I probably could have built a whole second cake with the scraps. I was obsessing over every tiny detail. The day of the event, I'm setting up this cake, right? And I'm still noticing all these little imperfections. The border isn't perfectly even in one spot. One of the sugar flowers has a tiny crack. I'm basically having a panic attack about how everyone's going to notice these flaws. Then the event starts, and here's what actually happened. The CEO walks over, takes one look at this cake, and goes, "Wow, this looks really good. Did you really make this yourself?" And then, get this, he doesn't examine the border. He doesn't inspect the sugar flowers for cracks. He just starts talking about how his daughter would love something for her sweet 16, and could I possibly do something similar? That's when it clicked like butter hitting room temp. He wasn't paying for perfect royal icing technique. He was paying for a custom centerpiece that made his event special. He was paying for the convenience of not having to figure this out himself. He was paying for the confidence of knowing that it would be beautiful and delicious and ready on time. The technique, that was just the vehicle. It's like, think of it like this. When you hire a photographer for your wedding, you're not paying them because they have the most expensive camera. No. You're paying them because they'll capture your special moments so you can focus on getting married. Same thing with cakes. Your clients aren't hiring you to demonstrate advanced piping techniques. They're hiring you to solve a problem. I need something gorgeous and delicious for this important celebration, and I don't have the time, skills, or energy to figure it out myself. Here's what clients are actually paying for: the peace of mind that their cake will be beautiful, the convenience of having one less thing to worry about, the excitement of having something custom that reflects their personality or event, the confidence that comes from hiring a professional who will handle all the details. And yes, good technique helps with a lot of that. But perfect technique, that's for you, not for them. I learned this lesson the hard way when I started finally asking my clients what made them choose me over other bakers. You know what they said? You seemed really professional and easy to work with. I loved how you listened to what I wanted. You made the whole process feel stress-free. Not one person said your buttercream roses were geometrically perfect. But here's where the perfection trap gets really sneaky. It doesn't just waste your time, it completely messes with your pricing confidence. Because if you're thinking you possibly charge what they charge, well, I'm not as good as a baker as what I saw on Instagram, so how could I possibly charge what they charge? This is exactly how you end up competing with grocery store prices. But the perfection trap feeds directly into that pricing death spiral. You start thinking instead of thinking client. I can't charge $200 for this cake because look at this slightly wobbly line. I'm charging $200 for this cake because I'm solving a $200 problem for this person. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying technique doesn't matter at all. You need to be able to make a structurally sound, delicious cake that looks intentional and beautiful. But there's this sweet spot between good enough to charge for and perfect enough to charge premium prices. And most of us are already in that sweet spot. We just don't realize it because we're comparing ourselves to highlight reels instead of focusing on solving real problems for real clients. Here's what I wish I could go back and tell myself during those perfectionist months. Your current skills are probably enough to start charging what you want to charge. What you need to work on isn't perfect typing, it's positioning yourself as the solution to your ideal client's problem. Because here's the real crumb of it. While you're at home practicing the same rows for the 100th time, there are potential clients out there right now searching for somebody like you. They need a cake for next weekend and they don't care if your roses are competition level perfect. They care that you're available, reliable, and can make their event special. But speaking of pricing, confidence, let's talk about the mistake that destroys it faster than anything else. The one that had me charging $30 for 6 hours of work and feeling guilty about it. The underpricing death spiral, and why it's not just about money, it's about respect, boundaries, and whether you'll still love baking a year from now. All right, so mistake number 3 is the one that literally made me want to quit baking altogether. The underpricing death spiral. This is when you would spend 6 hours on a beautiful 2-tier cake, shopping for ingredients, baking, filling, crumb coating, decorating, the works. You charge $45 because you want to be competitive and accessible. After ingredients, you made about $25 for 6 hours of skilled work. That's $4.17 an hour. But it gets worse because that $25, you haven't paid yourself back for the gas to go buy the ingredients. You haven't accounted for the wear and tear on your mixer. You haven't factored in the time you spent texting with the client or the consultations or the cleanup after. When you run the real numbers, you actually paid them to take your cake. That is the underpricing death spiral. But the thing is, this isn't really about the math. It's about what happens to your soul when you constantly undervalue yourself. There was this one weekend where I had 3 orders back to back. I spent my Saturday and Sunday in the kitchen, missed a play of my daughter's school, and By the end of it all, I made less than what I would have working a shift at Target. And the worst part, I felt guilty about feeling frustrated. Like, these people were so sweet and grateful, and they kept telling me how amazing the cakes were, and they're posting pictures all over social media. How can I be upset about that? But I was upset. I was exhausted and resentful, and I started to dread every single order. The thing I used to love, the thing that used to light me up, was becoming this source of stress and frustration. That's what the underpricing death spiral really does. It doesn't just hurt your bank account, it kills your love for baking. Because when you're working for pennies, every little thing becomes a huge deal. The client who just wants one small change after you've already delivered, that's not a quick 5-minute fix anymore. That's potentially your entire profit for that order. The client who's running late to pick up, now you're sitting around waiting because you can't afford to lose that $40. The client who pays with a personal check that bounces, congratulations, you just worked for free, and you're out in the ingredient costs as well. When you're charging what you're actually worth, those little hiccups are annoying, but manageable. When you're already working for basically nothing, every single one feels like a catastrophe. And here's where it gets really insidious. Underpricing doesn't affect just that one order. It actually creates this whole cycle that's incredibly hard to break out of. First, you attract price-sensitive customers. Those people who are shopping around for the cheapest option aren't usually the people who value craftsmanship and professionalism. They're the ones who are most likely going to haggle, most likely going to ask for freebies, most likely to be difficult about changes. Second, you train your brain to think that your work isn't worth much. Every time you charge $30 for something that should cost $150, you're basically telling yourself, my skills, my time, my creativity, none of that has real value. And third, this is the killer. You make it impossible to invest in your business. When you're working for $5 an hour, you can't afford better ingredients. You can't afford better tools. You can't afford to take time off to learn new techniques or work on marketing. So you stay stuck using the same basic setup, the same ingredients, the same techniques, while watching other bakers seem to effortlessly charge 3 times what you're charging. I remember stalking this one local baker's Instagram, let's call her Sarah, and she was charging $300 for cakes that honestly weren't that much more elaborate than mine were. And I'm sitting there thinking, how does she have the audacity to charge that much? What does she know that I don't? You know what she knew? She knew her worth. She knew that pricing isn't about comparing yourself to the grocery store bakery or trying to be the cheapest option in town. She knew that the right clients will pay for the right value. But when you're trapped in the underpricing spiral, you can't see that. All you can see is, well, I charged $30 last time, so how can I possibly ask for $100 now? It becomes this confidence death spiral. Low prices make you feel like you're not worth much, which makes it even harder to raise your prices, which keeps you working for pennies, which makes you feel even less valuable. And meanwhile, you're getting more and more resentful of your clients, more and more exhausted, more and more convinced that maybe you're just not cut out for this business thing. Here's what I wish someone had told me during my $30 cake era. Your prices aren't just about covering costs. They're about setting boundaries, attracting the right clients, and creating a sustainable business that you can actually enjoy running. When I finally raised my prices to what they should have been all along, you know what happened? I didn't lose customers. I lost the wrong customers. The people who were only hiring me because I was cheap, yeah, they went somewhere else, and good riddance. Because they were the ones driving me crazy anyway. But the people who actually valued what I brought to their celebrations, they didn't even blink an eye at the new prices. In fact, some of them said, finally, I was wondering when you were going to start charging what you're worth. That's when I realized something huge. The right clients want you to charge appropriately. They want to feel good about hiring you. They want to know that you're running a real business, that you're going to be around next year, that you're not struggling and stressed and resentful. When you undercharge, you're not just hurting yourself. You're making your clients uncomfortable too, because deep down, everybody knows that quality work costs money. And when something seems too cheap, it feels off. So if you're stuck in this underpricing spiral, here's what you need to know. Raising your price isn't selfish. It's not greedy. It's not presumptuous. It's professional. And it's the only way you're going to be able to build a cake business that you can actually sustain and enjoy. But here's where a lot of people get stuck after they realize they need to charge more. They think, okay, I need to raise my prices, but first I need to get all my business stuff figured out. I need contracts and policies and all that complicated legal stuff. And that leads us right into mistake number 4, the one that'll cost you money and stress in ways you never saw coming. I'll figure the business stuff out later. And trust me, later always costs more than now. Here's how this plays out. You're getting orders, people are paying you, things seem to be going pretty well. You might think, I don't need all that complicated business stuff yet. Contracts and deposits and policies. That's for big fancy bakeries. I'm just doing this part-time from my kitchen. And then life happens. Let me tell you about the order that made me realize I couldn't avoid all this stuff anymore. A woman contacted me about a baby shower cake for 50 people. Big order, right? She wanted this elaborate 3-tier cake with custom decorations, specific colors, the whole works. We had this lovely conversation. She seemed super sweet and she was willing to pay $200 for it. I was thrilled. This was going to be one of my biggest orders yet back in the day. So I spent my entire weekend planning this cake. I went shopping for special ingredients, sketched out the design, and blocked off the whole Saturday to make this perfect. Friday night, I'm doing my prep work, getting ready to start early Saturday morning. My phone buzzes. Text message from her. Hi, so sorry, but we had to cancel the baby shower. Family emergency. Thanks anyway, family emergency. Okay, I get it. Things happen. But I already bought $40 worth of specialty ingredients. I turned down another order for that weekend. And I had 0 recourse because we never talked about deposits or cancellation policies. I was out the money, out the time, and out the other order I could have taken instead, but that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the 3 days I spent agonizing about whether I should ask her to pay for the ingredients anyway. Should I mention that I already started the prep? Should I explain I turned down other work? I went back and forth, drafted like 5 different messages, asked my husband what he thought, and finally just ate the cost because I didn't want to seem pushy or unprofessional. That's when I realized that avoiding the business stuff wasn't protecting me from seeming too formal or intimidating. It was actually making me vulnerable and stressed and frankly, kind of unprofessional. Because here's the thing, real businesses have policies for a reason. Not because they're trying to be difficult, but because they've learned that clear expectations protect everyone involved. Let me give you another example. I had this client who wanted a graduation cake for her son. We agree on the design, the price, everything seemed great. The pickup was supposed to be Saturday at 2 p.m. Saturday comes, 2 p.m. passes, no show. I text her, hi, your cake is ready for pickup whenever you're ready. Nothing. 3 p.m., 4 p.m., 5 p.m. I'm sitting there with this completed cake, not knowing what to do. Finally, at 8 p.m., she texts back, oh, sorry, the party got moved to tomorrow. Can you just keep it fresh overnight? Can I just... Like, it's no big deal to store a whole decorated cake overnight and guarantee it will still look perfect the next day. If I'd had a simple pickup policy, something like cakes must be picked up within 2 hours of the scheduled time or storage fees apply, this wouldn't have been a problem. She would have known to communicate with me, or at worst, I would have felt comfortable charging for the extra storage and risk. But because I was winging it with no policies, I spent the whole night worrying about whether the decorations would hold up, whether the cake would still be fresh, whether she'd blame me if anything looked off the next day. Here's why I learned the hard way. Basic business practices aren't scary legal things you need a lawyer to figure out. They're simple, common sense protections that make your life easier and your business more professional. A deposit policy isn't mean, it's practical. When someone puts down a $50 deposit on a $200 cake, they're way less likely to just disappear. And if they do cancel, you're not completely out of pocket. A basic contract doesn't have to be 10 pages of legal jargon. It could simply be an email that says, here's what we agreed on, design, price, pickup time, and what happens if something changes. The cancellation policy isn't being difficult. It's setting clear expectations so everyone knows what to expect if plans change. And here's the beautiful thing that happens when you start implementing these basic practices. Your clients actually respect you more, not less. When I finally started asking for deposits, you know what happened? Nothing dramatic. People just said, of course. That makes sense, and pay for it, because that's what they expect from a professional business. When I started sending confirmation emails with all the details spelled out for clients, they started thanking me for being so organized and clear. It turns out that having basic business practices doesn't make you seem uptight or difficult. It just makes you seem professional and reliable, which is exactly what people want when they're trusting you with an important celebration. Look, I get why we avoid this stuff. When you're just starting out, asking for deposits feels presumptuous. Writing out contracts feels overly formal. Setting policies feels like you're being difficult before you've even proven yourselves. But here's what I wish I'd understood earlier. These practices don't make you seem less professional. They make you seem more professional. They don't scare away good clients. They attract good clients, and they filter out the problematic ones. And honestly, every single time I avoided implementing a business practice because I thought it was too much or too formal, I ended up in a situation where I desperately wished that I had protection. The client who wanted a full refund after I'd already delivered the cake because she changed her mind about the color scheme could have been avoided with a clear delivery policy. The client who insisted I deliver a cake 45 minutes away for no extra charge because it's not that far, could have been handled easily with delivery pricing spelled out upfront. Every single stressful client situation I've ever had could have been prevented or handled more smoothly with simple, clear business practices established from the beginning. And here's the beautiful thing about implementing these basic business practices. They don't just protect you from difficult situations, they position you as the professional you actually are. Which brings us to the final piece of the puzzle. Because if you've made these mistakes, you're not alone. I made them all, and there absolutely is a way to restart or start right. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, oh no, I've made all these mistakes, here are the 3 steps to restart right. Step 1, define your celebration niche. Get really specific about what celebrations you want to specialize in. Wedding elegance, kids' birthday magic, corporate sophistication. When you know exactly who you serve, your marketing becomes confident and your pricing becomes clear. Step 2, set your professional foundation. 3 simple things. Deposit policy, 50% to reserve your date. Pickup policy, 2-hour window. And confirmation emails. These eliminate 90% of stressful situations and we make you look professional. Debt-free. Price like the professional you are. Think about a celebration where you wanted everything to be perfect. How much would it have been worth for a complete confidence in your centerpiece? That's what you're selling. Transformation from worry to excitement. You're selling the experience itself. Remember that one mistake I mentioned? Here it is. Thinking you need to be perfect before you can be professional. Every mistake we discussed comes from believing that you need everything figured out before you can charge real prices. But professionalism isn't about perfection, it's about consistency, reliability, and clear communication. You can be professional from day one, even if your buttercream isn't perfect yet. There you have it. If you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I'll break down every single thing I wished I knew when I started my journey. So, if you're interested in turning your passion for baking cake into something real that gives you life and freedom, this is the right place. Also, tell me in the comments which mistake hit closest to home. I read every single one. And here's what I want you to do. Pick one theme from today and implement it this week. Building a successful cake business isn't about being the most talented baker. It's about understanding what business you're really in and positioning yourself professionally. You already have the passion. Now, package it in a way that serves your clients and sustains your business. Keep whisking up something amazing, and I'll see you on the next one.